3 months had passed since Li Jiwu sent his first message. What started as a small group of former soldiers had grown into something much larger. They called themselves the Solar Network, and they had members on Earth, Mars, Luna, and even in the asteroid mining colonies. Young Sokmin was one of their newest and most important recruits. Before the council arrived, he had run one of Earth's largest technology companies. Now he worked for a council-approved corporation, but he used his position to secretly fund the resistance. The money is not the problem, Seokmin told Jiwoo during one of their secret meetings. I can move funds without anyone noticing. The problem is getting supplies without raising suspicions. They were meeting in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Seoul. The council had built new transportation systems that made the old tunnels unnecessary. That also made them perfect hiding places. What kind of supplies do we need most? Asked Commander Oh Hyunwoo, a former military strategist who now coordinated resistance cells across Earth. Weapons are obvious, Jiwoo replied. But we also need communication equipment that the council cannot monitor. And most importantly, we need information. Doctor. Song Yunbi looked up from the alien device she was studying. She had been one of Earth's top physicists before the council restricted human scientific research. Now she spent her time trying to understand council technology. I have been analyzing the equipment Kim Do-yeon smuggled out of the council administration building, she said. Their technology is not magic. It follows physical laws we can understand. The problem is that they are thousands of years ahead of us. Can we catch up? Hyunwoo asked. Not in the traditional way, but we do not need to match their technology exactly. We just need to find their weaknesses. A young voice spoke from the shadows. I might be able to help with that. Everyone turned to look at Han Jisoo, a 17-year-old girl who had somehow hacked into their secure communication network. Instead of turning her over to the council, Jiwoo had decided to recruit her. The council thinks their computer networks are unhackable, Jisoo continued. But they made one mistake. They connected their systems to human networks to make administration easier. I have been mapping their data flows for weeks. She pulled out a small tablet and showed them a complex diagram. This is their surveillance network. They monitor all human communications, but they do it through predictable patterns. If we know the patterns, we can avoid detection. That is impressive, Song Yunbi said. But can you actually access their confidential files? Jisoo smiled. I already have. Look at this. The tablet showed a document that made everyone in the tunnel go silent. It was a list of other species that had been integrated into the council. Next to each species was a timeline showing their population decline after joining the council. The Valorians used to number in the billions, Jisoo explained. Now there are only 50 million of them left, and they all work as soldiers for the council. The Nixari went from 12 billion to 3 million. They work as technicians and administrators. Jiwoo studied the list. How long did it take? Usually about 200 years for complete integration. But humans are listed as a special case. The timeline shows they expect to complete our integration in only 100 years. Why faster? Asked Hyunwoo. Dr. Park Nari, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Because we adapt too quickly. I have been comparing human development to other species. In 50 years under council rule, we have learned and integrated their technology faster than any other species in galactic history. That sounds like a good thing, Seokmin said. It is for us, but it terrifies the council. Every other species they have encountered became dependent on council technology. They stopped innovating and started following orders. Humans keep trying to improve on everything they give us. Song Yunbi nodded. That explains something I discovered. The technology they have given us is deliberately limited. They have much more advanced versions that they keep for themselves. What do you mean? Jiwoo asked. They're faster than light travel, for example. They tell us it is too dangerous for humans to use. But the real reason is that it would allow us to leave the solar system and contact other species independently. Jisoo pulled up another file on her tablet. She is right. I found communications between council ships that mention something called containment protocols. They have been keeping us trapped in our own solar system. The implications were staggering. For 50 years, Humanity had believed they were junior partners in a galactic civilization. In reality, they were prisoners being slowly prepared for slavery. "There is more," Nari said quietly. "Kim Do-hyun contacted me yesterday. He says Ambassador Choi Min-ju has been asking questions about the final integration protocol. She is starting to suspect that her role as Earth's representative is meaningless." "Can we trust her?" Hyunwoo asked. Do-hyun thinks so. She has been Earth's ambassador for 20 years. She genuinely believed she was helping humanity. Now she is realizing she has been used. Ji-woo made a decision. "We need to make contact with her. If she has access to council planning documents, she could provide intelligence we cannot get any other way." "That is very dangerous," Seokmin warned. "If the council discovers she is helping us, they will replace her with someone more cooperative. The risk is worth it. We need to know exactly what the final integration protocol involves and when they plan to implement it." Over the next few weeks, the solar network expanded rapidly. Former government officials, retired military personnel, scientists, and engineers joined their cause. More importantly, they began to establish cells on Mars and Luna. The Mars colony had always been more independent than Earth. The harsh environment had forced colonists to become self-reliant and innovative. When they learned about the Council's true intentions, many of them were eager to fight back. Luna was different. The moon base was primarily a mining operation run directly by the Council. But even there, human workers were starting to ask questions about why so many resources were being shipped off-world instead of being used to improve their living conditions. Song Yunbi made a breakthrough with Council technology. She discovered that their energy weapons had a specific frequency that could be disrupted with the right kind of electromagnetic interference. It was not enough to stop their weapons completely, but it could reduce their effectiveness significantly. "We cannot match their firepower," she explained to the resistance leadership. "But we can make their weapons less reliable. In a fight, that might be enough to give us an advantage." Meanwhile, Jisoo had successfully infiltrated deeper levels of the Council's computer network. What she found was both encouraging and terrifying. "They are not as unified as they appear," she reported. "There are 12 different species in the Council, and they do not all agree on how to handle humanity." "What kind of disagreements?" Ji-woo asked. "The Valorians want to use military force to speed up our integration. The Nexari prefer the slow approach they have been using. The Etherians think humans are too unpredictable and should be eliminated entirely." This was valuable intelligence. If the Council species were arguing among themselves, it might create opportunities for the resistance to exploit. "There is something else," Jisoo continued. "I found references to other species that are not part of the Council. Independent civilizations that the Council has not been able to integrate or destroy." "Are any of them willing to help oppressed species?" Nari asked. "I do not know. But some of the Council communications suggest they are worried about interference from these independent civilizations." The resistance was growing stronger, but they all knew their time was limited. Council surveillance was becoming more intense, and several resistance members had reported being questioned by Council security forces. Ambassador Choi Min-ju finally made contact through Kim Do-hyun. She agreed to meet with Ji-woo, but only if they could guarantee the meeting would not be detected. Song Yunbi had been working on a solution to that problem. Using her understanding of Council surveillance technology, she had developed a small device that could create a temporary blind spot in their monitoring network. "It will only last for 30 minutes, she warned. "After that, their systems will compensate and the blind spot will disappear." It would have to be enough. The meeting was arranged for the following week. As Ji-woo prepared for the most dangerous mission of his life, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The solar network had grown from a handful of former soldiers to a galaxy-spanning resistance movement. They had weapons, intelligence, and most importantly, hope. But they still faced an enemy with technology and resources beyond imagination. The Galactic Council had conquered dozens of civilizations over thousands of years. They had never failed to break a species that resisted them. However, they had never encountered a species quite like humanity. Other races had accepted defeat when faced with overwhelming odds. Humans, Jiwoo was beginning to realize, had a tendency to become more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. The council was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The meeting with Ambassador Choi Minju changed everything. She arrived at the abandoned warehouse exactly on time, her face showing the strain of months of growing suspicion and fear. Dr. Song Yunbi's jamming device created their protective bubble of silence, invisible to council surveillance. "They lied to me for 20 years, Minju said without greeting. "Every report I sent to Earth about council benevolence, every speech I gave about our bright future together. All lies." Lee Jiwoo studied the woman who had been Earth's voice in the Galactic Council. She looked older than her 50 years, worn down by the weight of betrayal. "What finally convinced you?" he asked. "The final integration protocol documents. They let me see them because they needed my signature on some administrative papers. They thought I would just sign without reading like I always do." Her hands shook as she pulled out a small data device. "The protocol is not about integration. It is about elimination." Kim Doyeon, who had arranged the meeting, leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "They plan to reduce Earth's population to 50 million people within the next 20 years. The rest will be relocated to work camps on other worlds where most will die from harsh conditions. The survivors will be genetically modified to be more obedient and less intelligent." The warehouse fell silent except for the distant hum of the city above them. Jiwoo felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How?" Dr. Park Nari asked. "Engineered diseases that target specific genetic markers. Mandatory sterilization programs disguised as health initiatives. And for those who resist..." Minju paused, unable to continue. "Military action," Jiwoo finished for her. She nodded. 3 council battle fleets are already moving toward the solar system. They will arrive in 6 months. Commander Oh Hyunwoo stood up and began pacing. "How many ships?" 240 vessels, including 12 dreadnoughts that can destroy entire continents." The numbers were overwhelming. Earth's military had been disbanded 50 years ago as part of the peace dividend of joining the council. Humanity had maybe a few dozen armed vessels, mostly patrol ships and cargo haulers with light weapons. "There is more," Minju continued. "I have been in communication with representatives from other council species. Some of them are not happy with current policies." "What kind of representatives?" asked Nari. "Mostly younger members of species that joined the council more recently. They remember what it was like to be independent. A few have hinted that they would support changes to council policies." Professor Yoon Jinwoo, a historian who had joined the resistance after discovering that most records of pre-council Earth had been altered or destroyed, spoke up. "How many species have tried to resist the council before?" "According to the historical records I have access to, 17 species have attempted major rebellions in the past 1,000 years. What happened to them?" Minju's face grew grim. 15 were completely destroyed. 2 were reduced to tiny populations and relocated to reservation worlds. The warehouse fell silent again. The weight of galactic history pressed down on them like a physical force, but Jiwoo surprised everyone by smiling. "Good." "Good?" Hyunwoo stared at him. "How is any of this good?" "Because now we know exactly what we are fighting. No more guessing. No more hoping we are wrong. The council wants to destroy humanity, and they think it will be easy because it always has been before." Song Yunbi caught on first. "They are going to underestimate us." "Exactly. Every other species that fought the council did it the traditional way. They built big fleets and fought pitched battles against superior technology. They played by the council's rules." "What rules?" asked Jisoo, who had been monitoring their communication security throughout the meeting. "The rules that say civilized species fight honorably, that they protect civilian populations, that they surrender when defeat becomes inevitable." Jiwoo's expression hardened. "Humans have never been particularly civilized." Over the next few weeks, the resistance movement transformed from a secret organization into something approaching a shadow government. Using Minju's intelligence and Seokmin's funding, They began preparations for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Fleet Admiral Bae Taehyung emerged from retirement to lead the military planning. He had commanded Earth's space forces before the Council arrived, and he had spent 50 years quietly studying Council military tactics. Their doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority, he explained to the Resistance leadership. They use massive ships with powerful weapons to destroy enemy forces quickly and decisively. They have never had to fight an enemy that refused to meet them in open battle. What do you recommend? Jiwoo asked. Asymmetric warfare, hit and run, tactics. Make them fight on our terms instead of theirs. Master Sergeant Lim Soo-young, a former Special Forces operative, was put in charge of training resistance fighters. She had concerns about their unconventional approach. Guerrilla warfare works when you have places to hide, she pointed out. Space is empty. There is nowhere to run from ships that can track you across light years. Then we do not hide in space, replied Captain Shin Yarim, a pilot who had been secretly testing captured Council technology. We make them come to us, fight them in asteroid fields, planetary atmospheres, anywhere their big ships cannot maneuver effectively. The Resistance faced an enormous challenge. They needed to build a military force capable of fighting the most powerful empire in galactic history, and they had to do it without being detected. Song Yunbi's team worked around the clock to reverse engineer Council weapons and defensive systems. They could not match Council technology directly, but they found ways to modify existing human equipment to be more effective. Their shields are designed to stop high-energy weapons, she reported, but they are vulnerable to sustained bombardment with lower-energy projectiles. We can use old-fashioned kinetic weapons to punch through their defenses. Meanwhile, Jisoo had made contact with smugglers and traders from non-Council species. These independent merchants were willing to sell weapons and equipment to anyone with sufficient payment. No questions asked. The Krillian Syndicate controls trade routes in this part of the galaxy, she explained. They hate the Council because Council expansion threatens their business. They are willing to supply us with weapons and ships, but the prices are extreme. Seokman had been expecting this. How extreme? They want exclusive trading rights with humanity after the war, assuming we survive the war. Yes. It was a dangerous bargain, but they had no choice. Within 2 months, the first shipments of alien weapons began arriving at secret bases throughout the solar system. The most important breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Shin Yarim had been experimenting with a damaged Council scout ship that had been abandoned in the asteroid belt. While trying to repair its faster-than-light drive, she accidentally discovered something remarkable. I can modify the drive to create a temporary faster-than-light communication system, she announced at an emergency meeting. It will only work for short messages, and it burns out the drive completely, but it would allow us to coordinate with resistance cells across the entire solar system instantly. Admiral Bae immediately saw the implications. Real-time communication would give us a massive tactical advantage. The Council expects us to be isolated and unable to coordinate our forces. How many ships do we need to sacrifice to create the network? Asked Jiwoo. If we are careful, maybe a dozen scout ships. We can set up communication nodes at key points throughout the system. It was expensive in terms of resources, but the strategic value was enormous. The Council had never faced an enemy that could coordinate attacks across multiple planets simultaneously. As the months passed, the Resistance grew bolder. They began sabotaging Council mining operations and disrupting resource shipments. Each attack was carefully planned to look like accidents or equipment failures. The Council noticed, but they attributed the problems to human incompetence rather than deliberate sabotage. This assumption would prove to be their first major mistake. Professor Yoon made another crucial discovery while researching galactic history. He found records of a species called the hegemony that had successfully resisted Council expansion 300 years earlier. They were not destroyed, he reported excitedly. They were isolated. The Council built a barrier of automated defense platforms around their territory and cut off all contact. Are they still there? Asked Nari. According to long-range sensors, yes. The hegemony still controls 17 star systems in the outer rim of the galaxy. This information changed their strategic situation dramatically. Humanity was not alone in opposing the Council. There were potential allies out there, if they could make contact. Shin Yerim volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history, a faster-than-light journey to hegemony space to request assistance. It was a one-way trip, since they only had enough alien technology for a single FTL-capable ship. If I succeed, the hegemony might provide support, she explained. If I fail, you will never know what happened to me. Are you sure about this? Jiwoo asked. Someone has to try. If we face the Council alone, we will probably lose. But if we can convince other species to join us, we might have a chance. The night before her departure, the Resistance leadership gathered to see her off. The Galactic Council fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system exactly when Ambassador Choi Minju had predicted. 240 ships of various sizes, led by 12 massive dreadnoughts that could each destroy a small moon. Admiral Korvax, commanding from the flagship Domination, expected the campaign to last no more than a few days. General Kwon Minho watched the fleet approach from his command center hidden deep beneath Seoul. As the newly appointed leader of the unified Human Liberation Forces, he carried the weight of his entire species' survival on his shoulders. They are following standard Council doctrine, reported Intelligence Officer Nam Hyejin, studying the enemy formation. Dreadnoughts in the center, cruisers forming a protective screen, scouts moving ahead to map our defenses. What defenses? Asked Captain Jian Wushik with dark humor. He commanded humanity's largest warship, a converted cargo hauler with improvised weapons that would have been considered obsolete 50 years ago. That is exactly what they will be wondering, Minho replied. Long-range sensors show no major military installations, no battle fleets, no orbital defense platforms. From their perspective, we have already surrendered. The Council fleet began its approach to Earth, moving with the confidence of an organization that had never experienced defeat. They broadcast surrender demands on all human communication frequencies, offering generous terms for immediate capitulation. The response came not from Earth's government, but from every human settlement in the solar system simultaneously. The message was simple: no. Admiral Korvax was puzzled by the refusal but not concerned. Primitive species often required a demonstration of Council power before accepting reality. He ordered the destruction of what appeared to be a major human military facility on Mars. The facility exploded spectacularly when hit by the dreadnought's main weapons. What Korvax did not know was that it had been evacuated weeks earlier and filled with obsolete equipment and explosive devices. The real human forces were hidden in locations the Council had never bothered to map. First phase complete, reported Dr. An Yujin from her secret laboratory deep in the Martian crust. The Phoenix Project, her revolutionary enhancement to human adaptability and learning, had been successfully implemented across all resistance forces. The enhancement was not magic. It simply allowed humans to process information and adapt to new situations faster than normal. In a rapidly changing battle environment, those extra seconds of reaction time could mean the difference between life and death. The Council's first real shock came when they tried to land occupation forces on Luna. The moon appeared defenseless, with only civilian mining operations and no visible military presence. 3,000 Council soldiers landed at the main spaceport, expecting token resistance at most. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully prepared killing ground. Master Sergeant Lim Soo-young had spent months turning Luna's mining tunnels into a maze of booby traps, ambush points, and hidden weapon caches. The lunar gravity, which Council forces had not bothered to train for, gave human defenders a significant advantage. Within 6 hours, the entire Council landing force was dead or captured. More importantly, the humans had seized intact examples of advanced Council equipment, including personal shields and energy weapons. Their equipment is designed for their physiology, not ours, reported Lim after the battle. But we can modify it. Give me a week, and I can arm 1,000 resistance fighters with Council weapons. Admiral Korvax was forced to revise his assessment of human capabilities. Clearly, they were more organized than initial intelligence had suggested. He ordered a more methodical approach, beginning with orbital bombardment of major population centers. The bombardment began with New Tokyo, a city of 12 million people. Council doctrine called for the complete destruction of urban centers to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Korvax expected the city to be vaporized within minutes. Instead, his targeting systems went haywire. False signals appeared on every scanner, making it impossible to lock onto specific targets. When the bombardment finally commenced, most of the energy beams struck empty buildings or carefully prepared decoy sites. Han Jisu, now 16 years old and the Resistance's chief electronic warfare specialist, smiled as she watched Council systems struggle with her computer viruses. She had spent months studying captured Council technology, learning how to turn their own systems against them. Their computers are very powerful, she explained to General Minho, but they are also very predictable. They follow the same patterns every time. Once you know the patterns, you can make them see whatever you want them to see. The real population of New Tokyo had been evacuated months earlier through the old subway tunnels. The city above was now a ghost town filled with sensor decoys and hidden weapons. When Council landing forces finally arrived to occupy the ruins, they found themselves in another carefully prepared trap. Captain John Wushik chose that moment to reveal humanity's secret weapon, a fleet of small, fast ships that had been hidden in the asteroid belt for months. They were not powerful enough to fight Council dreadnoughts directly, but they were perfect for hit-and-run attacks against isolated enemy vessels. Remember, he told his pilots over the encrypted communication network, we are not trying to win a fair fight. We are trying to make them bleed for every inch of space they take. The asteroid belt became a nightmare for Council forces. Human ships would appear from behind rocks, fire their weapons, and disappear before the enemy could respond. Each attack was small, but there were hundreds of them. Council ships began to suffer from cumulative damage and crew fatigue. Dr. Song, Yunbi's technological improvements proved crucial in these engagements. Her modified kinetic weapons could punch through Council shields, while her electromagnetic jammers disrupted enemy targeting systems. Most importantly, her analysis of Council psychology had revealed a critical weakness. They are not used to losses, she reported. Every other species they have conquered surrendered after losing a few battles. Council commanders have no experience with sustained resistance. This psychological factor became apparent when Admiral Korvax made his first serious mistake. Frustrated by mounting losses, he divided his fleet to attack multiple human settlements simultaneously. In traditional warfare, this would have been sound strategy, but humans did not fight traditionally. Intelligence Officer Nam Hyejin had been monitoring Council communications for weeks, learning their command protocols and tactical preferences. When she detected the fleet division, she immediately recognized the opportunity. They have split their forces into 3 groups, she reported to General Minho. Each group is still more powerful than our entire fleet, but they are no longer supporting each other. Minho made the decision that would define the rest of the war. Instead of trying to defend everywhere at once, he concentrated all available human forces against the smallest Council group. It was an enormous risk, leaving most of the solar system undefended, but it offered their only chance of winning a major engagement. The Battle of Europa lasted 18 hours. Human forces used every trick they had learned: electronic warfare, asteroid ambushes, suicide attacks, and weapons that violated every convention of civilized warfare. They targeted life support systems, communication arrays, and even escape pods carrying survivors. When the battle ended, an entire Council task force had been destroyed. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council had suffered a major military defeat. The victory came at a terrible cost. Half of humanity's remaining warships were destroyed, and thousands of resistance fighters had died. But the psychological impact was enormous. Across the galaxy, oppressed species began to hope that the Council was not invincible after all. News of the victory spread through channels that Nam Hyejin had carefully cultivated. Within days, resistance movements began forming on a dozen Council worlds. The Valorian military, which had served the Council for centuries, experienced its first mutinies in living memory. We are not fighting just for humanity anymore, Minho realized, "We are fighting to prove that the Council can be beaten." Admiral Korvax, faced with the destruction of a third of his fleet and growing rebellion throughout Council space, made a desperate decision. He ordered the use of planet-killing weapons against Earth itself. The massive bombardment began at dawn, Earth time. Beams of energy capable of cracking continents struck the planet's surface, turning entire regions into molten wasteland. It should have been the end of human resistance. Instead, it was the beginning of something new. The bombardment had been targeted at major cities and industrial centers, but most of these had been evacuated or were already decoys. The real human population had been moved to underground shelters and off-world colonies months earlier. More importantly, the use of planet-killing weapons against a civilian population violated every treaty and law of civilized warfare. Images of Earth's devastation, broadcast across the galaxy by human agents, sparked outrage even among Council species. Captain Shin Yarim chose that moment to return from her impossible mission. Her battered ship limped into the solar system, carrying representatives from not just the hegemony, but from 6 other independent civilizations that had been waiting for someone to stand up to Council tyranny. Captain Li Jiwoo stood at the window of his small apartment, watching the alien ships float above Seoul like dark clouds. 50 years had passed since the Galactic Council first arrived on Earth. 50 years since humanity had been told they were now part of something bigger and better. 50 years of lies. The ships were beautiful, he had to admit. They moved without sound, their smooth metal surfaces catching the morning light. But Jiwoo knew what they really were. They were chains, pretty chains that most humans had learned to love. His communicator buzzed. A message from Dr. Park Nari appeared on the small screen. "Meet me at the usual place. I found something." Jiwoo grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. The streets of Seoul looked normal enough. People walked to work, children played in parks, and vendors sold food from small carts. But everything was different now. The buildings were taller than before, made with Council technology. The cars moved without drivers, controlled by Council computers. Even the food was different, grown with alien methods that made everything taste the same. Most people seemed happy. The Council had ended wars, stopped hunger, and cured diseases. But Jiwoo remembered what Earth was like before. He remembered when humans made their own choices. He found Nari waiting at a small coffee shop in an old part of the city. She looked nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she held her cup. Nari was one of the few scientists on Earth who still asked difficult questions. Most others just accepted what the Council told them. "They are not protecting us," Nari said quietly, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "I have been studying the Council records they let us see. Something is very wrong." Jiwoo sat down across from her. "What did you find?" Nari pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. It showed a holographic image of Earth from space. "Look at this. These are the mining operations they said would help us." The image showed huge machines digging into the Earth. They were taking metal and minerals from deep underground, but the scale was enormous, far bigger than anything humans needed. "They are not just taking what we need," Nari continued. "They are taking everything. In 50 more years, Earth will have nothing left underground." Jiwoo studied the image. "Maybe they need it for something important. That is what I thought too. But look at this." The image changed to show other planets. Dozens of them. All with the same giant machines. All being drained of their resources. These are worlds of other species that joined the Council. Some of them hundreds of years ago. The coffee shop suddenly felt very cold. Jiwoo looked at the image of a planet that was nothing but empty holes. What happened to the people who lived there? Most of them are gone. The few who remain work in the mines or the factories. The Council calls them integrated citizens. They have no weapons, no spaceships, no way to leave their worlds. Jiwoo felt sick. "How did you get this information?" "From Kim Do-yun. You remember him? He used to work for the Earth government, before the Council took over. Now he works directly for them." Jiwoo nodded. Do-hyun was a good man who had always tried to do what was best for humanity. If he was sharing this information, something was very wrong. He risked everything to get this data to me, Nari said. He says there are others in the council administration who are starting to ask questions, but most of them are too scared to act. The hologram showed another image. This one was a document written in the council's language, but with a translation below it. The title made Jiwoo's blood run cold. Project Domestication, Phase 3 Implementation. What is Phase 3? He asked. Nari's face went pale. According to this, Phase 1 was first contact and integration. Phase 2 was resource extraction and technological dependence. Phase 3 is... She paused, unable to say the words. Tell me. Complete control of human reproduction, education, and thought. They plan to change us, Jiwoo. To make us into something that cannot resist them. Something that will not even want to resist them. Jiwoo stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. Several people in the coffee shop looked at him. He sat back down and forced himself to stay calm. When? He whispered. Soon. Ambassador Choi Minju told Do-hyun that the council is planning to announce something called the Final Integration Protocol. It will happen within the next few months. Ambassador Choi was Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. She had always seemed to support the council's decisions, but Jiwoo wondered if that was just an act. We have to do something, Jiwoo said. What can we do? They have weapons we cannot imagine, ships that can destroy entire cities. And most humans think they are our friends. Jiwoo looked out the window at the alien ships floating above the city. 50 years ago, I was a soldier. I fought in the last war before the council arrived. I remember what it was like when humans had to solve their own problems. Those days are gone, Jiwoo. Maybe. But I know other people who remember too. People who still believe that humans should control their own destiny. Nari leaned forward. What are you thinking? I am thinking that the council made a mistake. They think we are weak because we accepted their help. They think we are stupid because we believe their lies. But humans have something they do not understand. What is that? We do not like to be caged. Even if the cage is beautiful and comfortable, we still want to be free. Nari smiled for the first time since they had met. You want to start a resistance movement. I want to remind humanity what it means to be human. The council thinks they can change us into something else. But they have never met real humans before. They have only met humans who were trying to be polite. They talked for another hour making plans. Nari would continue to gather information from her sources inside the council administration. Jiwoo would quietly contact other former soldiers and government officials who might be willing to fight. As they prepared to leave, Nari grabbed Jiwoo's arm. Be careful. The council has ways of watching us that we do not understand. If they discover what we are doing, they will discover it eventually, Jiwoo said. The question is whether we can be ready when they do. That evening, Jiwoo sat in his apartment and thought about what they had learned. The Galactic Council was not the benevolent protector they claimed to be. They were conquerors who used kindness and technology instead of violence to destroy the species they encountered. But they had made one crucial error. They had given humanity 50 years to study their technology, to learn their weaknesses, and to understand their methods. Most importantly, they had underestimated what humans would do when they realized they were being betrayed. Jiwoo opened his old military communications device, something he had not used in decades. It still worked. He began to compose a message to old friends and colleagues, people who had served with him before the council arrived. The message was simple. Remember what we swore to protect. Remember what it means to be free. If you still care about these things, we need to talk. He sent the message and waited. Within an hour, replies began to arrive. One by one, former soldiers, scientists, engineers, and government officials responded. All of them had the same message. We remember. When do we start? The Galactic Council had spent 50 years believing they had successfully domesticated humanity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The real humans were just getting started. 2 years after the Battle of Earth, President Park Chung-won stood before the newly constructed Galactic Assembly building on Luna. The structure was built from materials donated by 47 different species, each contributing something unique to create a symbol of unity rather than dominance. The old Galactic Council was dead. In its place stood the Democratic Galactic Assembly, where every species had an equal voice regardless of their military power or technological advancement. It had taken 2 years of the most devastating war in galactic history to make this moment possible. "The galaxy is free," Chung-won said in his inaugural address as the Assembly's first elected president, not because one species conquered all others, but because all species chose to be free. Admiral Ko Min-jung, commander of the Galactic Liberation Fleet, watched from the audience. Her fleet had grown from a handful of human ships to over 3,000 vessels crewed by dozens of different species. They had fought battles across 100 star systems, liberating world after world from Council control. The war had not been easy. The Council's response to widespread rebellion had been brutal and desperate. Entire planets had been sterilized rather than allowed to fall into rebel hands. Billions had died before the old regime finally collapsed. But they had won. More importantly, they had won the right way. "We could have become conquerors ourselves," Min-jung reflected during a quiet moment after the ceremony. She was speaking to Captain Lee Da-yoon, who now led the Exploration Corps. "After we defeated the Council fleet at Earth, we had the most powerful military in the galaxy. We could have taken their place." Da-yoon nodded. "Some people suggested it. They said the galaxy needed strong leadership, and humans had proven we were stronger than anyone else. Why did we not do it? Because we remembered why we fought in the first place. We did not fight to replace one tyrant with another. We fought to prove that freedom was possible." The conversation was interrupted by diplomat Ryu Jae-hyun, who had become the Assembly's chief negotiator. He looked tired but satisfied as he approached them. "The Valorian integration talks are complete," he announced. "They have agreed to join the Assembly as equal members." This was significant news. The Valorians had been the Council's primary military force for over 1,000 years. Their decision to abandon their former masters and join the Democratic Alliance had been crucial to ending the war. "What about the Nexari?" asked Da-yoon. "Still negotiating. They are having trouble accepting that their technological superiority does not give them special privileges in the new system." This was one of the ongoing challenges of building the new galactic order. Many former Council species had spent centuries believing that advanced technology automatically granted the right to rule over less developed civilizations. Convincing them to accept equality with primitive species was proving difficult. The Etherians had chosen a different path entirely. Rather than accept the new democratic system, they had retreated to their home worlds and cut off all contact with the rest of the galaxy. Intelligence reports suggested they were developing new weapons and planning a return to power, but so far they had made no aggressive moves. Dr. Park Nari, now the Assembly's chief scientific advisor, had been working on protocols for healthy interspecies cooperation. Her research into Council methods had revealed the importance of mutual respect and shared advancement, rather than technological domination. The Council's greatest mistake was assuming that advanced technology made them superior beings, she explained in her latest report. They used their knowledge to control others instead of helping others grow. The result was stagnation across the entire galaxy. Evidence supported her conclusions. In the 2 years since the Council's fall, technological advancement had accelerated dramatically. Species that had been suppressed for centuries were making breakthrough discoveries at unprecedented rates. Humanity played a crucial role in this renaissance, but not as overlords. Instead, humans had become teachers and facilitators, sharing their hard-won knowledge of resistance and adaptation with anyone who wanted to learn. Captain Shin Yerim, the pilot who had made first contact with the hegemony, now led joint exploration missions into previously unknown regions of the galaxy. Her ships carried mixed crews from dozens of species, all working together to expand the boundaries of known space. "We have found 17 new civilizations in the past year," she reported to the Assembly. "Most of them are at early stages of technological development, but some are surprisingly advanced. The important thing is that we are making contact, as friends and equals, not as conquerors. This approach sometimes created complications. Several newly discovered species were initially suspicious of any galactic organization, having heard stories of the Council's methods. It took patience and careful diplomacy to convince them that the assembly was different. The former Council worlds presented their own challenges. Planets that had been strip-mined for resources needed massive reconstruction efforts. Species that had been reduced to tiny populations required genetic diversity programs to avoid extinction, and everywhere, there were the psychological scars left by centuries of oppression. General Quan Minho, now retired from military service, had taken on the task of coordinating reconstruction efforts. His experience fighting the Council had given him unique insights into the scope of their crimes. The physical damage can be repaired, he observed while touring a former mining world. New cities can be built, ecosystems can be restored, populations can recover. But the mental damage runs deeper. These people have forgotten what it means to make their own choices. Rehabilitation programs were established to help former Council subjects adapt to freedom. Many had difficulty understanding that they were now allowed to pursue their own goals instead of following orders. Some actually requested to be given specific tasks, finding the responsibility of choice overwhelming after generations of servitude. Humans, with their recent experience of liberation, often served as counselors and guides for these recovery programs. The irony was not lost on anyone that the species the Council had planned to dominate was now helping their former victims heal. The economic challenges were equally complex. The Council system had been based on extraction and exploitation. Raw materials flowed from conquered worlds to the Council homeworlds, where they were processed into finished goods and sold back at enormous markup. Building a fair economic system required completely reimagining galactic trade. The Assembly established principles of equitable exchange, where all species benefited from commerce rather than just the most powerful. It was a radical departure from thousands of years of precedent. Yang Sok-min, who had financed the early resistance movement, became the Assembly's economic development coordinator. His experience in both human and Council business practices made him uniquely qualified for the role. The old system was efficient at concentrating wealth and power, he explained to the Assembly's Economic Council, but it was terrible at promoting innovation or improving living standards. The new system is more complicated, but it actually works better for everyone. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some former Council species genuinely believed that their technological superiority gave them the right to rule. They formed opposition groups within the Assembly, arguing for a return to natural hierarchy based on advancement levels. These groups never gained much support, partly because the war had demonstrated that technological superiority was not the same as overall capability. Humans had defeated the Council not through superior technology, but through superior adaptability, creativity, and determination. The Assembly's response to opposition was typically human: debate, discussion, and democratic resolution. Former Council species gradually learned that disagreement did not have to lead to suppression or violence. Different viewpoints could coexist as long as they did not threaten the fundamental principle of equal rights for all sapient beings. 5 years after the war's end, Li Jiwu found himself in an unexpected position: elder statesman and advisor to the Assembly presidency. His role in starting the human resistance had made him a galactic hero, though he was uncomfortable with the attention. "I never wanted to be famous," he told Dr. Song Yunbi during one of their regular meetings. She had become the Assembly's chief technology officer, overseeing the development of new tools for democratic governance. "You wanted to be free," she replied. Fame was just an unfortunate side effect. They were meeting in the same abandoned subway tunnel, where the resistance had held some of its first gatherings. It had been preserved as a historical monument, a reminder of how the galaxy-changing movement had begun with a few humans who refused to accept their fate. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Jiwu asked. "Sometimes I wonder if we just replaced one form of chaos with another." Song looked around at the tunnel walls, which were now covered with messages from visitors representing hundreds of different species. All of them expressed gratitude for humanity's sacrifice and determination. The council promised order and stability, she said. They delivered it by crushing everyone who disagreed with them. We promised freedom and equality. We are delivering it by letting everyone choose their own path. It is messier, but it is better.